Okay, so the talk that I'm sort of going to do, which is really only going to be a reasonably short one, is to try and lay some of the myths about print competitions and things like that, is to actually try and explain how you win, not just a regional competition, but also to do better in the national competitions. Because there are far too... Remember, as chairman, I get an awful lot of emails from people that complain, this is a fiddle, you know, this doesn't work properly, etc., etc. And I have to assure people that everything is done totally above board. I will not be a judge of the nationals at any point whilst I'm chairman. Because if I'm a judge, they can't complain about the judges. But if they want to complain about the judges, they can now complain to the chairman, because I'm independent of what goes on. And that's something I believe very strongly in. There has to be someone where the buck stops, but there has to be someone where people can actually complain to if they're not happy with what goes on. It's no good writing to me and saying, I think the judges are rubbish, because we all think the judges are rubbish, unless we win. But that's human nature. Everybody thinks the referee's rubbish unless they win, and then the referee was a good guy. So it's exactly the same thing. But what we know is that everything is above board. Both in the region and the nationals, I happen to believe that you will only be successful if you try and stand out from the crowd. It is quite astonishing how many people copy other people. It's quite astonishing how you see a couple of cracking pictures. In fact, I saw it today. I saw a copy of one of Panny's pictures that he won the nationals with. And it was so obvious that this kid had seen Panny do a talk or seen Panny's picture, and he's tried to copy it really badly. But then that's the difference between somebody that's up there and somebody that's starting off down here. It's all well and good learning and trying and moving forward, but don't do direct copies of other people's work, because you're never going to be able to hack it. Keith deserves a massive round of applause, because last Wednesday he put a panel in for associateship and passed with a beautiful set of images. So well done. And that was wonderful to see, because Keith has been entering the monthly competitions, he's been putting pictures in, and I said to him, wow, this work is terrific, and he took the lead and carried on from there, exactly the way that Karen did it at the photography show. Paul's done it exactly the same way. So the monthlies are very valuable, because it leads people down a certain path, and it leads people to getting better and better and better. And that's the whole point of the regional competitions, because if you do well in the regionals, you know that you stand a better chance in the nationals. It's a natural lead on. If a judge stands here and looks at your picture and says, this is wrong, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and you put it into the nationals without changing anything, guess what? You're going to finish up with a lousy score, and you're going to say the judges are rubbish. Okay? Use the person that stands here at your regional awards to educate you, because that's what it's all about. So the first part of the education is be different. Keith's pictures are very different from anything else that we saw last week. They weren't just ordinary portraits. And I certainly believe there's certain images that were in Keith's panel that would score very highly in the nationals, because they're different. Step outside the box. Don't just do what everybody else is doing. Feel free to express yourself. The new rules, there are no rules in the nationals. You know, it can be commissioned, it can be non-commissioned. If you took a picture for your mother and she hangs it on the wall and it's a phenomenal picture, put it into the nationals. There are no rules. There should not be rules for a national competition, because it's what allows us to experiment. It's what allows us to fluff our wings in creativity-wise so that we can try things we've never tried before. Qualifications are a different kettle of fish. Qualifications are what we do for customers, because our qualification is what we show customers, and we say we are qualified. And if you're qualified with customers' work, then that becomes ethical. Awards is about experimentation. Awards is about doing things you wouldn't necessarily do otherwise. And it's really funny how some people go, oh yeah, but that's not fair because I do my wedding pictures on the day and other photographers take the bride out a week later. There's nothing to stop you taking a bride out a week later. And some photographers are so phenomenal at weddings, they don't need to take somebody out a week later. The cream will always rise to the surface. Trust me. Rubbish doesn't win. Rubbish does not get highly scored. The judges are not stupid, okay? The judges know right from wrong. The judges know what looks good, what doesn't look good. The judges you can trust because they're not allowed to enter the awards themselves. So therefore, they've got no axe to grind with anybody. They've got no vested interest in anything that goes on. A judge will look at an image and will score that image. Then just so that you know what a judge looks for, one of the most important things is print quality. Print quality is paramount. And one of the reasons for that is if you showed us rubbish print quality, what the hell must you be showing your customers? Because your customers should be getting the best of whatever you produce. So if you're going to put prints into a competition that are rubbish, they are not going to score very highly at all. Presentation is important. At the photography show this year, we had some panels of work that were left around for people to look at so that people could look at photographs and see what standards and quality was like. I've got a box of 20 images there if anybody wants to sit and go through them, and these were successful images from a young lady called Paulina Dushman who got her associateship last year. She also, with I think that image, won, the way the awards work, one of the categories was the most aspiring photographer, and she won with that. And then she also got her associateship a couple of weeks later, or a couple of days later. So she went from sort of nowhere to associateship and has been absolutely dynamite. She now lectures in Australia and other places in the world.
And she's only been a photographer for 4 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Unbelievable.
She's one of those people that has a unique natural ability that just needed to be channeled, you know, about print quality and presentation and things like that. But when you have that much talent, then you can achieve anything you want. So print quality is paramount. Presentation is very, very important. Don't put them on dog-eared mounts. You don't need to put them on foam board, aluminium or anything else. Just simple card. Because when we stand, not on a drunken board, but when we stand photographs up, the most important thing is that those pictures stay. Now, when you do your print competition here next month, that is good enough to stand the prints on when it's straightened, because it just needs to be up the front so that the judge can point out good, bad and indifferent. What's good about a picture, what's not good about a picture. If you want good and bad, so what a judge looks like, a judge is going to knock points off for that burnt out shoulder. Because when you look at a photograph, your eyes, as the viewer, should go to the most important part of the picture. And in a portrait, the most important part of the picture is obviously the face. If my eye goes straight to her shoulder, you're going to lose points. And some people go, oh, that's a bit nitpicky. No, it's not. That's what portraiture is. A portrait of a person is looking at the mask of a face, not a bare shoulder. Okay? So I could go through every one of these pictures and I could probably find something that's very slightly wrong with them. And that's how the scoring works. Every photograph, when that photograph comes out, immediately it's worth 100 points. So the judge looks at it and it's 100. He's then got to look at it and say, what's wrong with it? You could lose 25 points for poor print quality and presentation. That brings you down to 75. That's way below a merit. You're going to get nowhere. I'd said to my wife where I was coming and sort of roughly what I was doing tonight. And she said to me, you're going to do an Eric Lowe. Now, none of you are old enough and none of you have been around in this industry long enough, but Eric Lowe was the pinnacle of classical portraiture. He was the best that there was. Okay, he's passed away now. He taught me everything. Okay, he was the best that existed. Okay, the very best. There was nobody to touch him in classical portraiture, and he taught me everything. But just so that you understand what you get, he cost me £100 for 2 hours in my studio to teach me. And he came to me every month for 2 years. Now work out 38 years ago, work out what £100 was worth 38 years ago and what it's worth now.
You buy an OM10 for £100 then.
You could buy something sensible for £100 then. Yeah, you're right. Now, it's a round of drinks. But the thing is, I learnt from him and I was willing to pay to learn from him because he was the best. But the point I'm getting at was you never wanted to be in a room where he judged your work, okay? Because he had this remarkable knack of disregard. And he would look at a photograph and he would go, that's rubbish. And he literally threw these prints across the stage. And people in the audience were literally dying, sitting there on their seats, and they were dying, going, that's my picture. And he would tell you what's wrong with it, and he would go, that's rubbish. And he taught you so much, but it hurt, and he didn't realise that he was hurting people. So it's a sort of, I won't say a knack I picked up, but I'm a little bit more thoughtful than that. Again, another image that you could look at and say, well, the problem is your eye runs to this massive area there instead of running to that there. And that would be the difference between an associateship panel and a fellowship panel. A fellowship panel, in effect, you should be able to go through and literally not be able to pull things apart and things like that. So quality and presentation are very, very important within any single photograph. And remember, that's also the huge difference between competition and qualifications. Qualifications is about a body of work. 20 images that come together, as Keith did last week, a body of work that comes together where we can stand back and go, they were taken by the same photographer. They look as if they were taken by the same photographer. There was a cohesion that brought them all together. And you could see a style that existed within that photographer. And that's the strength of what you're trying to create. Awards, regional and national, is completely different. Everything stands on one picture. That one picture that you put up is going to be judged as one picture. And because of that, don't put in more than one picture of the same person. Don't put in 3 or 4 pictures of the same girl, the same model, the same baby, or whatever. Because what happens is you lose impact. And one of the biggest scoring effects, as it were, is what I call the wow factor. It's called impact. When a picture comes up, and let's just look at a fellowship photograph for impact, okay? All of a sudden you're a judge and that picture comes up. And what you as a judge will do is you'll go, wow. Some judges tell me that they sort of in their mind, they go, oh, I wish I'd taken that. And that's a compliment, because if a judge goes, wow, I wish I'd taken that, then you know that it's got the wow effect. You know that it's had that effect on the judge. Now, if a judge looking at this starts off with 100 points, what's he going to knock points off for? He might knock points off because it's the wrong way round. And in fact, that's a very good lesson. If ever you think there could be a picture in doubt, on the back put a little arrow and the word up. I'm learning Northern before I go up there. Make sure you put on the back up. Okay? Because if a picture comes up and it's the wrong way round or something like that, it's immediately going to affect the impact of the image. And that could knock the score down 2 or 3 points. Okay? So you need to write on the back if you think that there's any doubt whatsoever. And then you won't make that mistake. And I've seen that happen. Remember, I've been judging for 30 odd years, 35 years, and I've seen everything that can possibly go wrong. Prints that are peeling, prints that are damaged, prints that are dog-eared, awful print quality, banding, colours that are just not right. So it's all to do with what the judge sees in front of him, and that's what he will score. So when a picture comes up that is a wow photograph, and that's the sort of picture that would do very, very well in regional and national competitions, because it's got impact, and that impact the judges are going to look at and they're going to score highly for. They're going to look at print quality, they're going to look at presentation, both of which are perfect. Now don't forget, all of these as well are being viewed under a specific light. Okay? Now, the lights are used to give you a nice even light across the whole picture. And if you had an exposure meter, I wonder how many people would own up today to having an exposure meter that isn't in the camera, and you took a meter reading, the exposure on that print is 1 second at f16. The meter reading will be 1 second at f16, and that's how intense the lights are. And that's what we judge qualifications by as well. And that's why a qualifications panel and prints in competitions need to be slightly different to a print that you would sell to a customer. A second at f16 to a customer will probably be too dark. When they put it on the wall and it's not been well lit in the house, it will look drab and dead and too heavy. Okay? So the wow factor, the impact of a photograph, has a huge bearing on how your picture will score. The judges are scoring from 100 down. And you as a businessman, my photographers have to enter the regional and the nationals. They have to. My bill is massive. And the one thing they must do is they must get merits. If they can score over 80 points on a picture and get a merit, we get a massive amount of publicity. And that's what it's all about for us, is publicity on social media for the business. And that's what we're driving for. The people that are going to win categories are going to be scoring 90s, 92s, 95s. In 35 years, I've only scored 2 pictures 100, because perfection doesn't exist. Okay? Perfection is just one of those things where you look at something and go, it's perfect. And that is a very, very rare thing. So any photograph that scores above 90 is absolutely wow. Anything that scores above 80, then you're in the game. You're getting your merits. You're picking up those things that are going to benefit you and the business. If you get your pictures back and they've scored 69, then you seriously need to look at your work, reconsider what you're doing, what you put in, why has it only got a 69? You then need to speak to somebody who will then be honest with you and say, that's because of this, this, this and this. One of the biggest problems for a photographer is this thing here. We become so emotionally attached to our pictures that we can't see the wood for the trees. We become so emotionally attached because that was a fabulous wedding, or they spent a lot of money, or they were a great family. Oh, I love those people, we got on so well. And that emotionally guides you down the wrong path. Sometimes the people you hate, you produce the most phenomenal work from. And in fact, that's another lesson to learn. Do not put a picture into the regionals or the nationals without permission. Okay, with GDPR this Friday, you have got to have permission. Our order forms have completely changed and it's got boxes on it now and people have to sign the order form. And one of them is, can we enter your photographs into competitions, yes or no? And that's one of the questions we ask, because to us, entering the competitions are our lifeblood within the business. You must have permission. You cannot put a picture into the region and go, well, you know what, if I do well, I'll get permission afterwards. Can you imagine winning a category or winning a trophy or winning an award and the customer turning around and saying, no, I don't want you, I'm not giving you permission? Who would want to, you'd want to kill somebody. And guess what, the person you need to kill is the one in the mirror. Because you must have permission before you put them in. If you don't, trust me, it will come back and beat you up at some point. And I've seen that happen many times. Impact will put your score up there. And that's why you've got to be different. That's why you've got to think outside the box. That's why you've got to experiment. That's why you've got to do things you've never done before. That's why you've got to push yourself, because that's what we do as professionals. We push ourselves. We don't want to produce the same boring pictures day after day after day, because that will kill our creativity. And that's what we don't want. We want to be as creative as we possibly can, because that's why we're professionals. The nationals are slightly different, because what you have at the nationals is you have the lights that I've mentioned. You have 5 judges in a row all sitting in chairs next to each other, and then you have 2 judges who stand back. Okay, now they change every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes somebody comes off, somebody goes on, somebody comes off, somebody goes on. And that way you keep the freshness, because otherwise you can become blurry-eyed and brain dead. But what happens is that image is first of all put up on a proper light box easel to start with, that people look at to get an overall impression. Then what happens is that photograph walks across the front. So that photograph is walked across the front of all 5 judges so that they can look at it closer. So that's why they don't need to be mounted, because they're not going to be standing up for any length of time. In our region, we mount them. In other regions, they can do exactly what they wish. You've got to decide for your Great Western region exactly what you want to do, and it's going to be your choice what you want to do for your region.
I think
for regions it's
I
cost
think we went
as
away
well.
from Rosedale because of the cost.
Yeah, it's all to do with cost.
Yeah.
And that's why the associateships and fellowships have changed this year, because everything used to be 20 by 16s. Now it's a case of you can put in the size that you see here for qualifications, because it's going to save you a few £100. The judges are very, very experienced individuals. They can look at a panel of 12 by 10s and be just as impressed as if they were looking at a panel of 2016s. You don't need a 20 by 16 to impress anybody. If you can win a beautiful trophy, if you can be the Welsh wedding photographer of the year and things like that, that to me is a huge bonus. But it's the education of having a good judge who explains right from wrong that will make you a better photographer. Yes. If I ask a group of photographers, what's the difference between a wedding reportage, a wedding documentary, a wedding classical, and a wedding, is it a la carte? No, what did they call it? Avant-garde. A la carte, that's because I went out for a meal last night for my birthday. avant-garde. Now, if you ask people the difference between those four, you'll get 20 different answers because they don't have a clue. So this year at the Nationals, you can enter one of four categories: weddings, portraits, commercial, and open, which is everything else. So what will happen is every single image will come up and every single image will be scored on that image. So if a wedding picture comes up, the judges are going to go, it's a wedding picture. The judges do not give a monkey's whether it's reportage, documentary, classical, avant-garde, whatever. They won't know or care. They see it as a wedding picture. Is this wedding picture beautiful? I mean, look at the rubbish comments that have been on Facebook about the Royals pictures this week. The hand was cut off. You know, the geezer had 3 minutes to photograph that mob, you know. So the thing is, there will always be mistakes in pictures. The judges are going to sit there and look at a wedding picture and they're going to score it as a wedding picture. Now, what will happen at the end of 4 days of judging is the chairman will then sit down with a couple of others and say, right, all of these have scored 95 and above. That's a reportage, that's a classical, that's a this, that's a that. So at that point, the judges know what they've got and what the categories are. The difference between a portrait classical and a portrait studio. What's the difference? But the judges will know because it will be scored as a portrait. Non-members, put it in open. And open this year will be street photography, landscapes, travel, and various other things.
That's written into it.
And that's why we've changed the Nationals, because that happened all the time. A picture would come up and a judge would say, are you sure this is in the right category? And the chairman would look on the back and say, well, it's been entered as portrait avant-garde. And he'd go, no, I think that's fine art. And it would sort of have to, you'd have to check with all the judges, all right, do we agree we're going to move it into fine art? And then
Slows
it'd go,
the whole process down.
it's so time consuming. Now, a picture will come up, it will be judged. It's as simple as that. And we're trying it for the first time. But then the new MPA is we listen to what people say and we're changing things. And we happen to believe that this will be a huge step forward. When I looked at our region, and we've still got something like 15 categories, I feel sorry for the judge that's judging ours. Because he's just going to do his head in.
Try.
So thank you very much. Hopefully you found that little bit worthwhile. It should just make things a little bit better for you.